you're here doing these panels all weekend, so everyone already knows you. But I mean, obviously, you're doing Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow. You interned at Marvel.
I did, yeah.
You wrote a ton of Marvel comics, ton of DC stuff.
Yep.
And anything else you wanna?
I do Troll Hunters on Netflix. Premieres on Friday. You know, so after you see Star Wars, you know, we're not stupid. We know you're gonna go see Star Wars first, but after you see Star Wars, check out Troll Hunters on Netflix. We also premiered on Friday Freedom Fighters: The Ray, which is an animated series set in the Arrowverse. It's on CW Seed. Russell Tovey plays our first superpowered gay superhero, which is awesome. Melissa Benoist, Carlos Valdez, Megalyn K, Echo Kellum, they all reprise their roles from the various Arrowverse shows. It's cool, it's fun.
That's awesome. And Jenny, you're such a wonderful artist. You're doing Wonder Woman. You just told me you're on Black Panther as well. Anything else you wanna?
4 connecting variants for Black Panther, which was an impossible task. I don't know how people do connecting covers.
And you're selling stuff upstairs,
Yep, I'm in the artist alley.
Yeah.
We got posters and books.
Let's talk. So the panel's about anti-heroes. And first off, I wanted to ask, who do you consider the best anti-hero in comics and why?
Oh, and why? I don't know if I have an and why.
You go first. I got to think on that one.
Gosh. Well, I mean, I guess I wouldn't say the best. Let's just go with my favorite. Probably Poison Ivy. Because she's certainly, I mean, she's a villain. She's not by any means a hero, but she does what she thinks is right, and she is loyal to the people she thinks deserve it, and even sometimes friends that don't deserve it. Yeah, does that work?
Good answer. Mark?
I'm biased, and truth be told, like, depending upon when you catch me, the answer would be different. But today I'm gonna go with Slade Wilson. I love Slade. He's awesome. And talk about a character like, that's just very nuanced, and he's, complex, and he's gone through all these ups and downs over the years. He's just really interesting with a rich history. So that's what I dig.
Well, as a writer, is it fun writing? Because you've written Slade before. Yeah. Is it different writing of anti-hero, or?
It is. Well, I mean, it's funny. It's like, I always say, like, no one thinks of themselves as evil, and no one thinks of themselves as an anti-hero. Everyone always thinks.
Me, a good driver.
You could very well be both of those things, but but everybody, we've been on the road enough to know that there are people who are bad drivers, but they're all driving around thinking they're good drivers. I don't know how we got on that topic, but
because I thought I was making a funny joke that wasn't funny.
The irony.
Yeah.
The irony. So yeah, I just think it's interesting. Like, I always like writing characters with a point of view that's different from mine. I always think that that's very fun and interesting, and I think the anti-hero, in many ways, like, the anti-hero has sort of been really sort of played out in television, because of The Shield and Breaking Bad and everything. But in comic books, it's alive and well.
And Jenny, this is going to be my dumbest question of the whole panel, but as an artist, do you approach that a different way too?
I mean, I'm trying to think if I've ever drawn anyone that I would consider an anti-hero. I guess I've drawn characters that have descended from sort of goodness into evil, but I don't really think that qualifies. Yes, I certainly would if I were to.
Kind of touching on that too, what you were saying, Mark, like, where is the line drawn? Because I would consider Batman maybe an anti-hero.
No, that's wrong. You're wrong.
Well, you could some iterations of Batman. No?
Okay, let's see. I would say that Batman follows a strict moral code, which, number one, involves not killing. I think that qualifies him strictly as a hero.
Okay.
He doesn't do what he thinks is wrong. That's sort of the whole point, is they always think they're doing the right thing. Yeah, but he follows a code to hold himself above that. So he doesn't fall into that. That's his whole thing, right?
Well, if he's like bashing somebody's brains in and they can't like think straight anymore, throwing them off two-story buildings.
But he's still alive.
They're still alive, yeah.
So, good guy.
I think Batman definitely thinks he's funny. I think Jenny's right, though. I mean, it's interesting. You've got a character with a moral code but at the same time, this moral code does leave a lot of leeway to break a lot of bones and leave people paralyzed. So I don't know. It's interesting.
We never see what happens to the.
We never see what happens to
the
the
criminals.
Someone should do that story. Like someone should do the story about like
A guy who's had a lot of life issues because of his run-in with Batman when he was just trying to make a buck.
he was just trying to put food on the table for his family. The poor guy.
And he doesn't become a supervillain. He's just like,
Yeah.
oh, my whole life is sucky
Just
now.
like I'm a schmo. It's like, hey, this is the best work I could get was being thug number 3 for the Joker. Like, come on, cut me some slack. Joker's making me wear the silly mask and everything. Like, it's not easy. There's no health and dental with this job. You know, ugh.
Well, who else would you consider an anti-hero? And like let's name some more and why, where they kind of tread the line.
I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier. Like working with TV, let's say, I can't think of the name of the character, Dexter. But then to my qualification for Batman, Dexter follows a strict moral code. That's, again, his whole thing. Like, he has to kill, so he makes it his life mission to do good with the bad thing that he has. So then I guess, like, is the qualifier that the ends justify the means? Because then he would fit into that category, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the Punisher, anti-hero?
Well, I mean, I guess I sort of thought that was his whole thing. Like, he is like...
He's definitely like Mr. Ends justify the means.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Anti-hero is like almost like, not to name drop another comic book character, but it's like a Rorschach test. It's like, you know, who you consider to be an anti-hero really reveals a lot about what you think an anti-hero is. I don't know if everyone, you know, shares the same definition or same opinion.
And Mark, as a writer as well, when was the first time you actually started like writing an anti-hero, and when you kind of started to just kind of, you know, understand the nuances of it?
You know, it's a good question. I would say probably with Wolverine. 'Cause I think Wolverine, at least in his earlier incarnations, was very much an anti-hero. I mean, he's not an anti-hero according to the strict moral code. The thing is, he clearly has a very strict moral code, but he was, you know...
I mean, he's certainly, chaotic good, you would say, if we're going by...
Chaotic good. He's totally chaotic good. Absolutely. Look it up.
Status? I can't think of what that's called. Status qualifiers or something?
It's been a long time for me.
But yeah, Wolverine is, I mean, following his own path and doesn't really care what society thinks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a qualifier for
that
the
is a good
anti-hero.
qualifier.
It's like
Yeah.
Something outside of what society would consider lawful. So he's not lawful good.
No,
Bringing it back.
And he also, like, you know, in his early incarnation was really sort of off the rails. You know, he would have those berserker rages, and he really was like this feral, like out of control creature who like slowly became tamed, you know, over the years. So he may not be an anti-hero now, but he definitely started out as an anti-hero, in my opinion.
And honestly, personally, for me, the first time I started understanding characters like that was like The Wire, where
Yeah.
pretty much like everybody's an anti-hero on that show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true, and they're anti-heroes in different ways. You know, like McNulty on The Wire, like it's funny. I think not until season 5 does he become a true anti-hero, but he always was like this really sort of tortured, conflicted soul. And then it all sort of comes to fruition in season 5. If you haven't seen The Wire, it's one of the greatest all-time TV shows ever.
And I wanted to ask too, like, who do you consider the anti-hero on your shows?
I think, well, Oliver Queen for sure.
Really?
I think so. Yeah. I think again, it depends. Like,
I'm giving you side eye.
well, if you don't think Batman's an anti-hero, then you're probably not going to think that Oliver Queen's an anti-hero.
I mean, I feel like, especially on that show, he's so conflicted by trying to be the best version of himself.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he does talk a lot about like this darker side that he's sort of wrestling with, and I suppose that could sort of work in that
I think
way.
you know he's obviously over the course of the show he's had this very complex relationship with killing. You know, one year he's killing, the next year he's not killing. One year he has that moral code, the next year he doesn't. And you know, hopefully if we've done our job as writers, and Twitter will probably disagree with me on this.
Twitter will disagree with you on anything.
That's been my experience. That's been brought to my attention. But we've tried to like make those ups and downs motivated by what's going on with him and in his overarching emotional journey. You know, Slade Wilson for sure an anti-hero. I think McRory on Legends is an anti-hero. I mean, he's really a bad guy who is in this situation where he's like sort of reluctantly doing good. I think Mick is, a good example of an anti-hero. Helena for sure. Sarah Lance even. Like Sarah Lance is very, she's an assassin and she also has her dark demons that she's wrestling with. Helena Bertinelli for sure. I think Nissa Al Ghul on Arrow, Katrina Law's character, again, her dad's Ra's al Ghul. She's got issues. She's got, a lot of moral complexity to her. We've got a wide variety of anti-heroes on Arrow.
It's mentioned in Oliver again. It's funny because, like you said, season 1 he killed everybody.
Yes.
Season 2 he kind of started turning.
Yep.
Do you consider him a hero at that point, or does he always have that moniker to him?
I think Oliver is always fundamentally a hero. He is always trying to do good, and that's maybe the difference. Like everyone thinks they're doing good. Only some people are actually trying.
And he's like always searching to find out what good is.
Yes, exactly. He's always trying. His heart is always in the right place. Even I always say the franchise of the show is Oliver making mistakes. This year on Arrow, we're because of the first 5 years, we've been trying to like have his mistakes be from a more informed, self-aware, mature place. He's making different kinds of mistakes, but he's a very flawed character. I mean, the moment Oliver gets all of his stuff together, that's probably when the show ends.
And speaking of somebody, like going back to the Batman argument, is there a hero, like obviously you wouldn't consider Wonder Woman or Superman an anti-hero, but can you see moments in their iteration where they were anti-heroes?
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Well, when Wonder Woman killed, I forget his name, Checkmate, maybe? Was that a thing that happened?
When who?
When Wonder Woman killed
Oh yeah.
Checkmate? Is that his name?
Checkmate. Morgan, Maxwell Lord. Maxwell Lord. Yes.
Was he Checkmate? Is that even a thing? Am I making up words?
No, there is a Checkmate in the DC universe. I don't think he was.
And that's
Checkmate.
not who she killed? I didn't read it because my Wonder Woman doesn't kill people.
And when at the end of John Byrne's run on Superman, just to show how old I am, when he killed the Kryptonian villains, General Zod and all of his friends, that was a real anti-hero moment. And actually, in both instances, the Wonder Woman and the Superman, they were like long-ranging consequences.
Yeah. Exactly. That was sort of like the whole point of that was they were both shown that there was no other choice.
Yeah.
Even though it went against everything of who they defined themselves to be.
Right.
And then their lives were destroyed by that one decision that they were forced to make, or at least they felt they were forced to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually like literally drove Superman crazy. He developed multiple personality disorder off of, killing the guilt of killing the Kryptonians. And I forget what happened with Wonder Woman and Maxwell Lord.
I'm trying to remember. None of her friends liked her anymore.
It was a long time ago.
She was a social pariah.
Well, you mentioned
the worst thing that can happen.
You mentioned Wolverine, Deathstroke. Any other characters you consider really famous and good? I mean, Deadpool, maybe?
I was just thinking Deadpool.
Oh, yeah.
For sure Deadpool.
Would be the most, obvious. Because, I mean, especially if you sort of define anti-hero as literally just not the traditional hero. He doesn't follow any moral code. He is just like, whatever feels like the right thing to do at this point is what I'm going to do. So.
Yeah, in D&D terms, he's pure chaotic.
Yeah.
Pure chaos. He's not chaotic neutral. He is chaotic.
But he's not. I would not say chaotic evil.
No,
he's not evil. He's neutral, right? I would say chaotic neutral.
I guess so. I guess maybe I'm using my D&D terms incorrectly. It's been a long time.
Well, who else though? Because this fascinates me. Like going back to the Batman argument, I don't think Green Arrow is an anti-hero, but I mean, any other characters you want to mention before?
Let's see.
I'm looking at you. I'm more of a contributor to a conversation, not a starter.
I'm trying to think. I should have done my homework. I should have been a little bit better prepared for this panel.
Somebody yell out a person we're not thinking.
We could even go through the movie franchises as well. I mean, Yondu recently with Guardians.
Sure. Yep.
Because in the first one he was just a villain, and then in the second one you sort of see.
Is Star-Lord one? Because he's a hero, but he's got his own interest in mind.
I don't know.
He was just a hero that hadn't been shown his purpose yet.
Right. Oh, that's a good way of putting it.
Interesting.
That's a very good way of putting it. You know, I don't know. I don't know what they've got planned for Kylo Ren in the new movie. Don't spoil it for me.
Yeah.
But you could go that way.
Well, let's talk at the Star Wars universe then. Say Han, anti-hero.
Well, I mean, I guess in the same way that Star-Lord is, he just was like floating, doing his own thing. It was out to make a buck, and then he found a purpose that kind of made him a hero.
Mm-hmm. But at that point, couldn't anybody like find their purpose? Like
Anybody could be a hero.
Oh.
Oh.
yeah. I was thinking that's what for some reason I'm thinking of like Zod. Like if he just didn't kill Zod,
Well,
maybe there was.
I don't know if Zod was redeemable.
but again, he thought he was doing what's
Yes,
right.
he totally thought he was in the right, you know. And he I think Zod has an interesting point of view. It's like, you know, he's trying to bring his planet back to life, at least in Man of Steel. You know,
Yeah.
he's trying to bring his planet back to life. Like it's pretty noble, you know. And he's definitely willing to break a lot of eggs in the service of that omelet.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And he thinks the eggs, just to continue to butcher my metaphor, like those eggs are humans. Like, what does he care about humans? It's
Yeah.
like, you know, when you build a house, you don't really think about all the ants that you're displacing. You know, it's not
Yeah.
relevant to you. So that's, you know, that's Zod's point of view, and it's a valid point of view.
Well, on that point too, did that make Superman an anti-hero after he killed Zod in the film?
Oh, I don't remember. How's
I mean,
that?
in that particular film, I would say his character is not what we define it to be in the comics.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Jenny on that. Like, you know, I was not a fan of Superman killing Zod in the movie. You know, even when Byrne did it with Superman, it felt wrong. It didn't feel like Superman.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And is there anything you're currently reading or watching that you really love anti-hero wise?
Yeah, I'm just finishing up. I'm late to the party. I'm finishing up right now the second season of Stranger Things. I think Steve is like a great anti-hero. Steve is
Because you
fantastic.
think he's just going to be like the typical,
80s bully.
cool guy, and then he really grows
Yeah.
character-wise, and his hair.
And his hair. I think his hair grows with his character. Is that how it works? It's also like, you know, maybe we're conflating, and we shouldn't be conflating, is the distinction between an anti-hero and a character arc.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
like, you know, Steve and Han Solo.
And evolving.
Yeah, evolving. Like that's different. That's just like someone becoming a better person.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like, I think an anti-hero is I think a character who's, and again, everyone's opinion is going to differ on this, is a character in my mind who is a villain, but is the hero of their own story. Vic Mackey is an anti-hero, but he's a villain. You know, Jax Teller in Sons of Anarchy, same thing. You know, Walter White in Breaking Bad. Like they're doing bad things, but they're the hero of their own story, as all villains are. But rarely do you tell a story from the villain's perspective.
Mm-hmm. But for example, somebody like Walter White, he's, like you said, an anti-hero and a villain, but he still has that moral code about his family. Can you think of anybody who went from anti-hero to total villain?
Well, actually, I would make the argument of Walter White.
You
Yeah.
think so? Really?
I
Even though he still loved his son?
I know he sort of did his. I mean, as you're watching the show, you sort of become aware that there is no way to get out of this. Like, there's just no way to redeem himself. And with what he had, he did what he could to make redemption at the end of his life. But that is the whole point, is he starts this purpose to save his family. And at some point, he just really likes being a psychopath.
Yep.
And he just sort of like, I guess, de-evolves
Yeah,
into
I mean,
the
yeah.
worst version of himself. But he's so tired of, I mean, that's sort of the whole point, is he's a nice guy. And he's so tired of being a nice guy that he's like, I want to be the one in power. I want to be the one who knocks. So I would not consider that even a smidge of heroicism. Is that a word?
Anyone else?
Who goes full villain?
Yeah.
You could argue Anakin Skywalker. You know, he starts off as a pretty good guy, goes full dark side, full, full bad.
Right. Yeah.
You know, is ultimately redeemed. Really old spoiler alert, is ultimately redeemed.
Wait, I haven't seen it yet. No.
Check out Return of the Jedi. It's better than people think. You know, trying to think of who else. There's a good argument to be made. Like McNulty in The Wire doesn't become like a traditional criminal, but spoiler alert, he does end up committing criminal acts in the 5th season of The Wire that are not evil, and they're certainly come from a good place, but he really crosses a line, and doesn't cross it back.
Mm-hmm. And is this, again, as a writer, is this, from what we're saying, it almost feels like the anti-hero is the true cusp of what makes a story in any capacity, is what I'm sort of gathering.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a writer, I always try to write from a place of emotional honesty and emotional complexity, and especially a lot of the stuff I write are people in very heightened situations where they have to make moral choices that are complicated. And there's not, they're often faced with multiple choices, and none of them are good. They're heroes who are really trying to pick the best of a series of bad options.
The best of multiple evils.
The best of multiple evils, exactly.
Have you ever want to start writing?
No.
Just art.
Just art. I don't know. My husband is Steve Seeley, Tim Seeley's brother, and he's always like, we should do a project together, and I'm like, that sounds like a really good way to get a divorce. To just get in a big fight about this thing. But I don't know. I choose to tell my stories with pictures.
Mm-hmm. And when you were an intern at Marvel and kind of going through the initial motions of learning how to do all this stuff, did anyone ever come to you and kind of explain the nuances of the anti-heroes?
Oh
or?
gosh, I wish.
Mm-hmm.
I wish. No, I mean, it's funny. Like I have to say, I'm as a writer, I'm very sort of self-taught in that regard. I didn't have a lot of people early on in my career who sort of took me under their wing, and I learned some little stuff, good, how to write subtext, but and also when I would start out writing, the anti-hero wasn't as big a deal, at least in television, as it became. I was, I wrote on shows like Law and Order, which are, they did have moral complexity to them, but not that much. At the end of the day, it's like McCoy has to go prosecute the person. McCoy may occasionally cross an ethical line in order to get his man, as it were, but it wasn't that emotionally complicated. I guess I did some work on the practice where the characters were a little bit more, morally nuanced, but that was always in service of their client and sort of the push-pull between the lawyer's obligation to do everything they can, in service of their client versus their own moral conscience. They were characters who wrestled a lot with their conscience versus their professional obligations.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that too, because it feels like television, it took kind of a while to kind of establish itself with the anti-hero, because in films, like Brando was an anti-hero in pretty much everything. And so where do you think TV started to kind of take the turn?
I think it was honestly once cable and non-network became an option, because the thing is, network, it's funny, network has had emotionally complicated sort of stories, but not emotionally complicated heroes, because it was, as a historical matter, the characters, the episodes were very, very episodic. So it wasn't serialized storytelling, and it's only when you do serialized storytelling you can actually get into emotional arcs. If the character in the show needs to return to the status quo at the end of every episode, you're not going to get any character evolution. So it wasn't until cable that sort of broke that out, and you had more serialized storytelling that started happening in network as a result. That's when you started, I think, to see that develop.
Mm. And what about in comics too? Because the one I considered initially was Iron Man, maybe, because he had those demons.
Just because he was a jerk.
And, yeah, but it was the black and white time for a while. When do you think the era kind of shifted there too?
I mean, I guess that's just the modern age, right?
Yeah, I would say like late 80s, early 90s. I think honestly,
Definitely Spawn, like
Oh,
90s.
of course,
Like
yeah.
once they realized that there was money there, they just got as much as they could out of it. But
I think Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen
yeah,
probably were like the
Yeah.
big. That was where the big sea change occurred.
So we have Alan Moore and
Frank Miller.
Frank Miller to thank.
Yes, yes. I think Rorschach is definitely an anti-hero in Watchmen. Batman. That's where he's paralyzing people and
Yeah.
and doing terrible things. And again, in service of
the greater good.
Yeah.
And would you have any advice for any like budding like writers or artists to try to, get into the mindset of these type of characters?
My big thing is write from a place of truth and try very hard to not make that your own truth. Like, recognize that there are different points of view out there. There's a wide swath of humanity, and there's a lot of different ways different people respond to situations, and try to locate what those responses are and write from an honest place about them.
What about yourself?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one.
But it is a good thing because like when you think of an anti-hero, it almost kind of makes culture better, kind of what you're talking about, where you can understand, like, we all hate people, but everyone's not truly bad.
Right.
There are some people. No, I think there are some people who are legitimately terrible people, like who are legitimately bad.
This is real life we're talking.
This is real life.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I think it's really important that, especially now, we call them out on it. And we say, hey, look, everyone has their demons, but there are some people who let those demons consume them and become their justification for doing terrible things. And then there's all the rest of us who are all getting over our demons and manage not to do terrible things. And I think we need to call out the people who do the terrible things.
That's great. And finally, to wrap it up, can we talk more about what you guys have in the works now? I mean, with your shows and with your art.
Still doing Wonder Woman. It comes out twice a month, so that's 2 jobs every month.
How do you do that?
How do I
Draw a book that comes out twice a month?
I only do the covers.
Oh,
That would be impossible. Although if
That would be
you're familiar
impossible.
With Mike Norton, who used to be my studio mate, he has his own creator-owned book. He has a strip that he does, and then I think he was doing 2 books on top of that. He's a beast. It's
That's
insane.
crazy.
He draws. I mean, I've asked him before. I was like, why do you do that to yourself? And he's like, I don't know. I guess just like my father died when he was young. His siblings died when they were young. I just sort of assumed that I would not live to a ripe old age, and I wanted to spend as much time as I could doing what I love to do. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, that's the most like thoughtful,
Cool.
most beautiful answer. I thought you were just like greedy. Just like wanted all the money.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's
Yeah.
inspiring. That's very cool.
Mark, what about yourself?
I've lost track of the question.
What do you have upcoming that you want to?
Oh, what do I got coming up? Well, Troll Hunter's coming out. Freedom Fighters The Ray. X-Men Gold every other week, every other Wednesday. You can pick up a new copy of X-Men Gold. Arrow is on Thursday nights on the CW. Legends is traveling to a new time. We'll be off in January and back with a straight run of episodes in February in Supergirl's time slot on Monday nights at 8. And then I've got a bunch of TV pilots that I'm working on.
Speaking of time, when do you have time to do all this stuff?
I don't. Actually, I wish I had your studio mate's answer.
I'm so depressed. I hate working.
I don't know where I get the time. I mean, I have a very understanding family that helps. I have wonderful writing staffs on Troll Hunters, Legends, and Arrow that, quite frankly, do so much great work that it does afford me the time to chase all these other little passions. So it's them. They're my secret weapon.
That's awesome. And finally, you guys are upstairs once again. If anybody wants to say hello, ask questions, get some stuff signed, buy some things.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please come on by. It's been a lot of fun meeting everybody. I've never had a table at a comic book convention before, so this is a new experience for me. And it's been a lot of fun meeting everybody.
Give it up one more time. Jenny Frison, Marc Guggenheim.
Thanks, guys.